if you're investing.
Investors will.
The podcast for all things real estate investing.
So, welcome back to another episode of Investor One on One, the podcast where we sit down with the nation's top real estate investors and entrepreneurs to uncover how they build, scale, and succeed. Today's guest is an industry leader in the commercial real estate world, and he's doing it a little differently. He's the founder of Rauen Capital, where he's carved out a niche investing in triple net lease properties with national tenants like Starbucks, Dollar Tree, and Sonic. Known online as a fast food landlord, he's built a cash flowing portfolio focused on stability, recession resistance, and simplicity, while helping passive investors and consistent returns to his private fund. When he's not closing deals or breaking Guinness World Records, which we'll get to in the end, he's out running actual marathons, raising money for charity, and giving back through his family foundation. So let's welcome Tom Rauen.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's so good having you on, man. So yeah, let's just start off with your story, your beginning, and follow up on that nickname of yours, the fast food landlord. How did that come about, and what drew you to triple net investing in the first place?
Yeah, so I was running CEO of 1-800-T-shirts.com and looking to, generate passive income, build some wealth, and real estate. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was like, okay, real estate is the key. And I bought a fourplex, and immediately it was the worst decision I ever made in my life. And it was an absolute nightmare. I dealt with everything possible. We had drug dealers in the fourplex. We had a hoarder. We had just all sorts of problems. So tenants weren't paying rents. They were trashing the place. We were dealing with police calls. We were dealing with the basement flooded. You name it, like every possible worst case scenario that could have happened with that fourplex happened. And so eventually we evicted all the tenants and sold the building. And I was like, gosh, I really got to figure this out. Um, I do not want to own real estate where people live, and deal with tenants like this ever again because it was just absolute crazy. And I didn't have time for that. I'm not very handy, so I'm not like a fix and flipper type of guy. And so I wanted something passive. And at that time, I had watched the movie The Founder, which is about McDonald's and how they built this big empire with McDonald's. And there was a quote in that movie that stuck out to me. The CFO said, "We're not actually in the burger business, we're in the real estate business." And that like rung a bell, and I was like, wow, that is fascinating, how that works. And then I met somebody locally, and this guy's in his 80s, and he owned a whole pile of Dollar Generals and some other real estate as well. So I sat down and I talked to him, and he said, well, yeah, just drive down the street. He said Starbucks and Arby's and Applebee's and, Panera and Taco Bell. He's like, all those are owned by investors just like me. And I'm like, Wait, what?" It froze me right in my tracks. And I was like, how is this possible? I thought watching the founder movie of McDonald's, I just assumed all these national franchises own their property. Like, why would they not own their own real estate? And then come to find out they don't. And actually, McDonald's, right now only owns about 35% of their real estate. And investors just like me and others out there own, the other 65% of McDonald's real estate. So, once I figured that out, I knew like that was where I wanted to go because with apartments, it was so hands-on. There was, I was fixing things, which I don't know how to fix things. I was dealing with tenants that didn't pay and just dealing with all the trash and crap that went on with apartments. And I was like, all right, if I can have a national franchise as my tenant, a business, and on apartments, they're doing like a 6 month or a 1 year lease. And these national chains are doing 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, sometimes 25-year leases. I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And then the more I learned about it, I discovered also that these national franchises, when you own that real estate, they also pay the taxes, the insurance, and all the maintenance upkeep. So I'm like, wait a minute, this seems almost too good to be true. Like I don't even have to go and mow the grass or plow the snow or like fix anything at all. And so that's when I knew like that was the niche I need to carve out net lease real estate. And and specifically triple net lease. And the triple net lease, if you don't know, what that means is the three nets are taxes, insurance, and all the maintenance and expenses. So basically the tenants are paying all that. So exactly like what your rent's going to be for, if that lease is 10 years or 20 years, and it's structured in the lease plus a corporate guarantee by these big national tenants. You know exactly what your income is every month. You know exactly what your expenses are, which is zero because the tenant's paying for it. So it makes it just very simple, from a management standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint of knowing like exactly what's happening with those properties. So that's how I narrowed in on it. And I call it a fast food landlord because most people don't know what triple net lease is or what net lease means. And it's very easy to understand when I say fast food landlord, like I am the landlord to all these fast food restaurants. And it doesn't just encompass fast food restaurants. So we also have other asset classes as well in there. So, there's medical, there's industrial, and other stuff besides fast food. But that's where, I coined it, and we got a lot of Starbucks and different properties like that.
So as you said, you've built an impressive portfolio with different fast food chains, medical industry, all those kind of places. How do you find and evaluate deals in this space?
Yeah, so that's the other part about this space is you will never drive past a Starbucks typically and see a for sale sign in the front yard, right? So it's different than a single family home or a multifamily property. So a lot of these are, bought and sold and traded off market, sometimes just right landlord to landlord. We get a lot of leads from accountants, lawyers, attorneys. So sometimes there's a business partner breakup, sometimes there's a divorce, sometimes there's um, somebody passed away or they had a illness or something and need to sell some property. So that's one way we get some leads. We also work with some brokers, and there's a few different websites where we can source these at as well.
For sure. And when you get one of these, properties, what makes a triple net deal great versus just average? Are there any key metrics or features that you always look for?
Yeah, so there's a lot of underwriting when it comes to these, and it's different whether it's a single tenant property. So most of the time when you think of Panera Bread or Olive Garden or even McDonald's in that case, they're single tenants, meaning it's just that building on, a piece of property. And then the other one is multi-tenant. So that's going to be your, larger strip centers. Sometimes it's like a grocery store anchored strip and, or a mall or something like that. So kind of everything from those single tenants to multi-tenants. And there's a lot of different factors that go into the underwriting to analyze the deal, um, and see, if it's going to fit our criteria. So, the tenant one is, who is the tenant and do you believe in, their business model and are they going to be long term? We've seen, even though they're a big national franchise, we've seen franchises come and go. We've seen some go, up and down on, just the strength of their businesses. A big one that comes to mind, Kmart. Someone that owned a Kmart for a long time probably thought that was great and going to be here for 100 years. And that went out of business. Same with Sears, some other big box retailers. And then when we're talking smaller ones, Hardee's has had a big dip. Pizza Hut, one of their big national franchisees got into some trouble, and we saw a lot of Pizza Huts close. And so we look at what I would call tried and true businesses, but regardless of the tenant that's in there, we want real estate that's in a high traffic location on the corner of Main and Main, with a heavily dense area of population surrounding that. So regardless of who the tenant is, we understand that there's going to be cycles in time that if a tenant does move out or something happens to that business, that there's going to be a new tenant come along and want to occupy that piece of real estate because it's got the traffic, it's got that prime location, and it's always going to have that demand for it. So we look at that. We'll look at Google reviews and see, what kind of feedback, what kind of management they have. Do they have, steady customers? They got good customers. Uh, Business that has 5-star reviews obviously is doing pretty well. And if they're doing well and they got generating a lot of revenue, then they can afford to pay rent. And so we look at that because that matters as well. Um, and we also just look like, how long has this business been here? Is it a new business? Is it existing? Do they have steady clientele? A lot of times we'll look in the areas that we know very well. So we know, we're clients, we patronize the businesses and we may know the manager, we may know some staff that work there. So we understand like what's happening at that property far beyond just like what the numbers are on the paper. It's like what are the actual things that are going on there. So a lot of properties we do a site visit, we'll go eat lunch there, whatever, and just get a feel for like, all right, is this a busy place? Is this ran properly? Do we see this business being here in 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30 years down the road? Like, what does that look like? So those are just a few of the factors that we look into on the underwriting when analyzing a deal.
For sure. And for all these investors that are hearing this right now, they're like, wow, this sounds amazing. I want to jump into this. It seems hands off. There's a lot of benefits. But what are the biggest risks? I know you spoke a little bit about, some companies like Sears or Pizza Hut that, they didn't have as much success as some investors thought. But in your opinion, what are the biggest risks investors need to understand before they jump in?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk is, just understanding, that just because it is a big national tenant, it's not 100%, there. But you also, I have, pretty strong faith in a lot of these tenants and looking at their financials and knowing the backgrounds and understand, who's the leader, that's the CEO of that company, what's their marketing look like and things like that. Um, of that longevity. And, I will bet on that versus, a tenant that's in an apartment that's paying a 6-month lease. So, I like those long 10, 20-year leases. And especially when it's backed by a big company, those are pretty solid.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit more about your cash flow fund. How do you structure deals for passive investors that want to get into this? What kind of returns or timelines can they expect?
Yeah, so we've got a few different options, but right now we just kept it real simple with our cash flow fund, and we offer a straight 10% return with monthly distributions. So we found that a lot of investors just like that passive income. They don't have to learn how to underwrite the property. They don't have to be involved in the property, dealing with, any of the tenants, any of the lenders, anything like that. They can just invest their money and be getting that monthly distribution in their bank account. So we keep it very simple for them. And it's a nice way that they can get involved, they can learn, they can see the back end, and also collect that monthly distribution.
For sure, that sounds great. And do you prefer corporate guaranteed tenants or strong franchisees? And how do you assess the credit worthiness of your tenants? And I know we spoke about so many different like restaurants and chains. Do you have a specific company that you prefer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I like a nice mix of it. And, so we know the strength of Starbucks and, how big of a chain they are and their credit rating and stuff like that and publicly traded company and all these things. But at the same time, when you're that big of a company, there's also some bureaucracy with it where they could say, you know what? We're going strictly by the numbers because they got this board of directors and they got to answer to shareholders and all these other things. And so they can easily make a quick pivot and all of a sudden just shut down a bunch of stores, right? Like we've seen that with different types of franchises. So those are good, but I also know like there can be some downsides that come to that as well. So I like a little mix there, but then I also like a mix of locally owned mom and pop businesses. And the reason for that is even though they don't have this big structure behind them and maybe a lot of capital behind them to support them, I know that their heart and their work ethic is there and they're going to do whatever it takes to make that business happen. And so that local mom and pop, they're going to put in 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And in some cases, like this is their identity and this is part of who they are of operating the small business. So I'm always a big advocate for small business owners and operating those small local businesses. So those are nice. In a lot of our strip centers, we have nail salons and barber shops and different, massage therapists and other different small local businesses that I know some people shy away from, but I love them because I know like this is what they do. They live and breathe their business. They're known in the community. They're involved. They're supporting the local charities. They create relationships and they're friends with their clientele and things like that. So I like both. And I'm always, like I said, an advocate for small businesses. And I like to own real estate with a little mix in there.
For sure. And I know in the beginning you spoke a little bit about how you find those properties. How do you find these businesses, or do they come to you?
Most of the properties that we have are already leased up, so we're not going out searching for new tenants or trying to develop them, from the ground up. So we look for existing properties that already have stabilized tenants in them. So we know that, those tenants are already doing well. They've already got a customer base established in that specific area, and we're not going out and trying to search for them. Now, if someone does they get to their lease or they move their business or something like that, then we are going out, finding a new tenant to, fill that space. And if it's a good enough location, usually we've got a wait list of tenants that are ready to go.
For sure. And for the people hearing this right now, and they're seeing these small businesses, and they could be like, okay, maybe in a few years from now, everything's going to be digital, or these businesses are not going to be here anymore, and rising rates and retail's just evolving in general. Where do you see the triple net market heading in the next few years?
Yeah, so it's super hot right now, and I think it continues to be hot because we've seen this a lot, especially in retail when it comes to, let's say, clothing retail or fashion. So a lot of people thought like, well, if you can just go online and order shoes and order, t-shirts and stuff like that, like why would somebody want to go to the mall and go shopping? And so there was a brief period of time there where a lot of retail stores were closing down because it was a lot cheaper for them to just be an e-commerce brand or have that. And what we're seeing now is now a lot of these dot coms and e-commerce brands are opening up brick and mortar stores because they're understanding that to create the connection with consumers, it's all about the experience. And part of that experience is when they walk through the door of a brick and mortar store, what is the music that is playing? What is the vibe? How are they being treated by the employees? They want to see and feel and touch, the product and be able to hold it in their hand besides just look at it on a digital, website or on their phone. And so I think that experience and that being able to be interactive in a live setting will be more valuable as things shift even more to AI. People are going to yearn for that connection and that human connection, that real life connection versus the digital connection. So I feel like even with a lot of stuff moving to AI and the digital, impact of it, there's still going to be a very strong need and strong demand for physical locations.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. And following up on that, you're an amazing entrepreneur. You built multiple companies. You have an amazing story like you told us today. If you had to start from scratch with nothing but your, experience and $100,000, how would you do it today?
I would find a good operator that's got experience. I would invest with them and learn alongside them for a couple years. And so as that continued to build up, I look at, some small increments. I made some small investments earlier on. I still make some investments here with other operators in the last few years where it may be in a different asset class than what I'm familiar with. And I know when I'm investing with other operators, it's not just the return on investment that I'm looking for, but it's the education. So some of it, the cost of the investment is me getting the education return, not just the return on the money that I'm getting as well. So I think it's finding an asset class, finding an operator um, that is similar to you or where you want to get to, and then investing alongside of them and learning the ropes that way.
That's great advice. And you spoke in the beginning about how you started real estate. You bought a multifamily, you were struggling with it, but that kind of led you to where you are today. Do you have a tip, a quote, a book, or a piece of advice that you would like to recommend every real estate investor right now?
I think the biggest tip is you can learn a lot by you know, reading blogs or watching YouTube or listen to podcasts. But at the end of the day, like I see a lot of people, they say they're going to invest in real estate or they're going to start doing this, but they're waiting for the right time to have enough education and to learn all these things. And the next thing you know, 5 years goes by and they still don't have a piece of real estate or they still haven't invested in anything. And 10 years goes by and the same thing. So my biggest piece of advice would be get off the sidelines, get in the game and start. You just have to start with the first one. You may lose money along the way. And sometimes that's the cost of education is losing a little bit. So start small, but get your feet wet, get off the fence. And once you get in, that's where you really start to learn because nothing beats when you're actually in the game versus just watching from the sidelines. So once you get started, also, I think it builds momentum. And if you consistently, once you get started, if you can consistently keep investing on like a regular basis, whether it's quarterly or once or twice a year, but then do it every single year, that's how you create that compound effect and the investments start snowballing over time. And that's the most powerful thing is once you can create that compounding of your investments, that's where the real magic happens, but you can't get there unless you get started first.
I agree. That's some wise words, man. And what's next for you, would you say, on a personal level and on a business level?
Yes. We're we're keep looking for deals with landlord. We're teaching others, basically the frameworks and formulas that we use to, grow this portfolio passively, basically from zero to over 72 million in assets under management. So we're teaching others that want to get in the game, that are ready to invest, that want to start building up passive income and long-term legacy wealth for their families as well. And on a personal, thing, I'm a ultra runner, so I like running 50 and 100-mile races and push myself to, see what's possible on a physical, mental, emotional endurance level. And so I've got a few races on my mind that, we're going to be going after. And I find that the more I can push myself personally on those endurance events, it also helps push myself professionally on all the other endeavors I go after as well.
Amazing, man. Love the vision. And I know I brought up something in the beginning in the intro about you ending up in the Guinness World Record. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I with one of her t-shirts, I was looking for a way to create some media hype, and I always had this bucket list goal of breaking a Guinness World Record. So I looked up Guinness World Records I had to do with t-shirts, and one was wearing the most t-shirts at one time. And so I broke the record wearing 247 t-shirts at once.
Wow, that's insane, man. Well, Tom, thank you again for joining us today. I've enjoyed this conversation so much, and your experience and advice will definitely help our listeners. If they want to reach out or learn more about what you do, how can they connect with you?
Yes. Find me on Instagram at Fast Food Landlord.
For sure. And thanks to everyone watching. Catch you next time on Investor One on One. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Thank you.